This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everyone. She is a valuable resource for parents of children with ADHD, helping you navigate all the challenges that come along with that. She's an ADHD coach, but also she's a master IEP coach and advocate when it comes to the school situation. That all being said, we're going to focus more today on behaviors of children and teens and how that really is a form of communication. We may not look at it that way. We may look at it as, oh, somebody's acting out, but they're trying to tell you something. She is amazing at what she does and has been doing this for many years and has walked that journey herself with her family. Karen Lowry is back with us. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and putting a spotlight on this. And I believe it applies to all kids, all teens, when they're doing something you would prefer them not do. It's very much so a form of communication. You're being told something. They're trying to tell you something. They might not be able to verbalize it. Now look at that through the eyes of a parent with a child with ADHD, and even more challenging and more impactful. Where do you want to begin today?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of my biggest topics that I want to reinforce to parents all the time is about that very thing, because ADHD comes with it behaviors that are not acceptable in the classroom. And so many times these kids who are very empathetic and very sensitive pick up on those vibes from teachers and kids and believe that what they believe, and they're bad kids. And this just is being reinforced in my head today too, because I'm talking to another person who will probably become a client, and the position that she's in. And again, this has to do with behaviors reflecting communication, and that communication being ignored, and that child not being supported. And that's one of the biggest things that I can really talk about. And having started out on this journey with my youngest child, who has at the time combined ADHD, so you not only have the inattentive piece, but you have the hyperactivity and impulsive type behaviors that are not looked upon as favorite in the classroom at all. But unfortunately, I think it becomes a vicious circle when you have these types of neurodiversity symptoms, because you can say that a child is misbehaving in the classroom. And I think unless parents realize that they have the right to speak up and they have that data, they need to ask for the data that goes with the behavior. So, and for instance, this child who is in third grade and still cannot read with an IEP of 4 years, has an IEP with goals. I haven't seen the IEP yet. Obviously, it's not, it needs to be, it needs to be modified, of course. And there's really there's no amount of structure in place that I can really pick up on. But the behaviors then become awful. Like, one is just peeing in the classroom, which is pretty awful, right? And you can look at that kid as being bad. Why is this kid peeing in the classroom? Well, he's in a self-contained classroom with 5 other kids with autism and ADHD and behaviors that are probably not managed. That has to be the worst type of environment that kid could be in, because it's just going to trigger him and set him off as well. There's no structure for him. There's no support for him. And so I think that in this case, too, when you see these kinds of behaviors, maybe pinching, impulsive, not being able to focus, that should be the data that you look at. And apparently had a couple of years ago had an FBA, which is a functional behavioral assessment. And that is to really, make those kinds of assessments of what behaviors are occurring in what classroom, and what is done about it at the time. And that can really give you a lot of information about a really good, strong behavior plan that's very individual. And again, I can't stress enough that kids like our kids with ADHD, and in this case also autism, are very individual. You can't just say, well, this kid has this, so this is what this kid has, and this is how we need to support him. It's all different. It all different and needs to be looked at as to why this behavior is happening. And the question that the parents should be asking is, when did that behavior happen? What was happening right before that behavior? And then what did the teacher do after that behavior happened?
Mm.
And you might find some things antecedently and afterwards that might not really be positive to help that behavior.
That's a really impactful point there. When your child with ADHD is doing something in the classroom, how that teacher reacts
Hmm.
can be a game changer. And
Absolutely. It's very important to know. And, not saying that every teacher in every classroom knows how to handle certain behaviors, but if your child has an IEP and has a case manager and is backed by a child study team, then this needs to be discussed. And
mm,
that's the whole point of, IEPs aren't just pieces of paper they file because they legally have to, and then they ignore them. I'm afraid that's happening in this case. And sadly, that's why I do what I do, because I think parents don't realize how important they are, because they again are looking at, well, I'm the parent, I'm only the parent, right? They're the professionals, they know how to handle it. And when I ask for something and the school pushes back on me, well, they must be right. I've seen it time and time again.
that's another point there too. And I equate this also to the medical field, not taking anything away from Western medicine or anything like that. But just because somebody walks around with a lab coat and a stethoscope doesn't mean they have all the answers. We put people on a pedestal. You have to be your own advocate, not to take anything away from teachers. They got a tough job, a lot of students, lots going on there. I don't know how they do it. However, they don't know all the answers either. You're putting your faith in somebody who's teaching that class, and maybe they're not reacting the way they should to a child that is exhibiting some type of behavior because with ADHD. So there's a lot going on here, and I just want to bring up another point here. When you mention years went by in a classroom with an IEP and a student couldn't read, there's so many of those stories going around just
Mhm.
in general, not even in classrooms with students with ADHD in general, where they'll do an assessment test and they find out somebody can't read after years, just an average student. Pretty amazing that that can actually happen.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. And like I think I've mentioned before that they're mandated to do every 3-year testing. And
Yes.
so asking the parent found out that there was testing done. It was like months ago, and they finally just got results in March. So again, it's just, following what they legally have to do, but not really supporting that child. And, in this case too, you want your child to be in the least restrictive environment. What environment is that child going to learn in and is least restrictive? And if you're in a self-contained classroom like he is, that's the most restrictive. And I know that he was in a um, MDA class, multiply disabled class. So there are more kids in that class. And it was decided that he was struggling. So they moved him to self-contained where there's less kids without support. So again, my point here is it's just so important for parents, I think, every time a move is made like that, make sure that you get the data that you need. It's very, very important. That's how you know, not every school is um, positive about supporting a child like this. Sometimes you just have the wrong administrators to deal with. Sometimes they're great. I'm never
Yep.
going to generalize, but if you find yourself in this kind of situation, I mean, not, tantrums aren't going to do it. The only thing you're going to be able to do is collect the data that you need. And no one can argue that objective data. And I think that If you don't know to do that, like this parent didn't know to do that and just kept
Mm.
getting pushed back, then, your kid is going to continue to suffer and not learn. And, third grade, he's supposed to be reading to learn, and he's not. He's still learning to read, but he's not even in a reading program to begin with. So again, it's just, and so how can you just imagine a child's level of frustration? You know, even though kids with ADHD do sometimes have behavioral issues, sometimes they're just impacted by the struggles of learning or social situations or whatever it is that they're not being supported in.
Sure.
They're struggling, showing behaviors, and that's why we call it, that's communication. He's communicating.
Yep.
What is happening in this classroom? When he peed in the classroom, what was happening in that classroom that created that? He's not a bad kid. What happened? What kind of level of frustration was there to make him do that? So to me, it's very emotional because I've seen it happen to my own child when I went through this whole journey, and I see the success he now has and how smart these kids really are. But like dealing with school sometimes they can't deal with the box that people put these kids in. They're just not that kid.
Mm.
They need to be supported in different ways, which again is legally why we have IEPs to begin with. This is why we have goals. This is why we monitor these kids on a yearly basis and more frequently, by the way, if you want to have another IEP meeting to discuss areas that you have concern for. So it's uh,
Hmm.
it's it's kind of upsetting.
Do you feel, Karen, that if there's something a little bit off, you might be blessed and everything is working the way it should be and your child is being supported and things are good. But if things are a little bit off, you have concerns. I'm not being negative here. I'm trying to be proactive. Should you approach it as if you're building a case in terms of the data, in terms of the facts, the information, the emails, as you're collecting all of that? In the back of your mind, should you be thinking that, I might need to build a case here, so I'm going to approach it that way in everything I do?
Well, I think you really are. You're building a case based on data that you see,
Mm.
which would not, when you say build a case, and it's not necessarily a legal case,
Yes,
it's
yes.
it's a case that manages um, the goals in the IEP and manages the kind of support that a child needs.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right. That is exactly what you're doing. You're managing all of that because without data, they push back, and they've done that a lot to this family,
Mm.
pushing back about a lot of things. And you can't push back until you have the data. And interestingly enough, once they heard the word advocate, they started to think about maybe what else they could throw at this family to help them and make them feel better about things. So that they know the right thing,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. So
It's important for,
are you saying that once the school, the system, heard that there was an advocate involved for the family, just even saying that started changing things a little bit?
yeah,
Love
not
that.
enough. There's a lot of questions about this case,
Sure.
a lot of concerns about this case, but certainly I think just to throw a bone at the family, they were going to, add some pull-out reading support, which obviously he should have been having for the past 4 years
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even the right kind of support anyway. But unfortunately, that's probably not going to be good enough either. So, but I think that it's important, though, in this situation too, to, immediately sometimes I think people want to threaten schools with lawyers and go to court. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's a negative kind of thing that you don't really want to do.
Sure.
Um, you want to work it out with the school. School knows better. And I think that it can happen most of the time as long as you work with the school and they're willing to work with you. You can make it work.
And again, this is not like bells and lights and alarms going off. It's more of, I'm putting this in my back pocket in case I need it in the future, but documenting things, keeping tabs on things. And I love the advocate view of things. I never thought of that because it's almost as if the school is saying, Oh, we got somebody else watching. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that story I mentioned about a child similar, not being able to read after a bunch of years, that made national headlines. That's how I'm aware of it. So imagine if things went that way for one particular school district, maybe the child that you're supporting. I don't think any district wants that on their head.
And also, too, it's a hard situation because in this particular class, there are six kids with autism and ADHD and one teacher.
Mm.
So you have six kids with IEPs. Um,
Ah,
I guess it depends on the state, but I'm not sure that that works with. Um, it certainly doesn't work as far as meeting the needs of each child, for sure.
mm.
And I think, again, there's just a lot to deal with. But again, my point is that you as the parent, you have a lot of rights and you have a lot of knowledge about your own child, and you can make this happen. But I think that there's two communications really that I talk about. Behavior is communication happening from the child. You
Yep.
just have to figure it out, right? And the other piece of communication is the communication of you and the school. So sadly, here we are in April, middle of April.
Hmm.
So the school year is winding down now. Nothing's going to really be changed much by the end of the year, but he can have ESY, extended school year, which is certainly something that he certainly is eligible for to, you know, beef up his reading skills that apparently he has none of, and to have everything so that he hits the ground running in the fall, where he has a modified IEP, a behavior plan that works, and perhaps even in a less restrictive environment as well. I would guess that that would probably change behaviors a little bit. I really do.
Um, do they, in these situations, offer any kind of tutoring or like even through the summer, to try and catch up? I know that tutors are available and summer school and things like that, and especially for um, children, teens who have even challenges being around other students. But how does that look here when it comes to IEPs and ADHD?
I think that, I mean, she could certainly get a tutor on her own, but the school has to pay for the extended school year.
Yeah.
That ESY is part of the IEP. That mean they can say, and they many times do, schools in general can say no to ESY. But ESY is not only because of regression. And a lot of times the schools say that he didn't regress, so he's not eligible. It is not only because of regression. And in this case, it is certainly because he has not met his goals. So they are mandated to have ESY in the summer, and they have to follow his IEP. It's very specific. IEP and its goals, ESY has to connect to that. So that's going to be a very important piece to this. They can't just do simple little schoolwork that has nothing to do with a research-based program to learn to read. That's what that child really needs. Yeah. So, and as far as the other piece, like you're mentioning tutoring, they have also reading programs, whether you're in a contained
Mm.
class or whether you're in a general class included in a class, pull-out programs where, you might go for 2 to 3 times a week for a half hour, 45 minutes. Whatever your issue is, whether it be phonics or comprehension, whatever his issues are, should be addressed too. Whether he needs outside tutoring too, certainly that is an option that sometimes parents will have a tutor on their own after school for homework issues, but certainly the school really has to participate.
In the situation, the case that you're working with that we're talking about, how is it revealed that this student didn't know how to read?
Well, I'm a little bit confused because he's in third grade and we should have known it before today, right? Before this year. But what I'm hearing is they had the mandated annual IEP meeting, which again, you could have an IEP meeting every month if you want.
Mm,
Everybody always thinks that they only need it once a year. They're only mandated once a year. They just as soon only have it once a year. But so that's what she had. And I guess somehow somebody mentioned that he's just not learning. He's just not reading. The little that I know about this case so far, I almost feel like they're not taking responsibility for that.
hmm
You could blame the child for that. Well, he's just not reading. Oh, he's just not learning. Oh, he has bad behavior. That's not true. That's not true. I'm sure it's not true. It should be red flags to lack of support, you know, lack of support in a behavior plan, and lack of communication all around. So it's something that there's a lot of things that need to be changed for this child. It's
What
just
did
not
this child's
good.
parents tell you initially? How did it begin? The conversation, how did it begin?
Well, it's interesting because the mother has her hands full. She has four other kids, and the grandfather, her father, is the one that reached out to me, and he's
Mm,
just trying to help. And then once we spoke, he said, you do need to speak to my daughter." And then she, filled me in a little bit more because he's not like involved with day to day. So
sure.
he knew a lot, but she kind of filled in a little bit more. But again, some of what she couldn't fill in was because of a lack of communication on the part of the school.
Mm,
So that's the piece that I think everyone should be taking away from here is that when your gut says something's wrong, and you parents, and I know in particular moms, because let's face it, they're the ones involved a lot of the time, not
hmm
all the time, but they're the ones in the up front. I mean, at least from what I understand or what I've seen happen, you have a gut feeling. That moms always have gut feelings about how things are going and what needs to be done all the time, and she does. But they feel like they can push back on her, and that's a shame because she's right. Any school should be disgusted that they have a third grader who can't read.
100%.
It's just not
Um,
right.
we're just about out of time. Final question here. If a parent is uncomfortable dealing with the school, maybe there's been some pushback, whatever the situation is, can they elect you to be the communication bridge? Is that possible? Does that ever happen?
The school having an
Well, like
advocate talk
you're
with
gonna.
them.
I'm a parent. I'm uncomfortable talking with the school. They've been, I feel that they're skirting issues, maybe playing some games here. Um, can I say, you know what, school, Mrs. Karen, she's my advocate. We're working with her. She's going to communicate with you. Could that ever be a scenario?
I think it's a combination of both. I
Okay.
think the advocate would or the coach would be with the parent, and many times I help parents. I'm sometimes remote depending on who I'm speaking with. I can give support to a parent to maybe go to an IEP meeting and be successful based on what we talked about. So
Mm-hmm.
it really should come from the parent, but the support, I can be the support behind the scenes,
Yeah.
or I can be the support at the meeting itself.
Yes.
But we can both speak, but obviously I'm representing her too because I'm here.
Yeah, I'm like as a parent, I don't know what to ask for. So yeah, certainly. And a lot of these are done virtual. You can be on a virtual
Yeah.
call. You're just hanging in the background. Something presents. I could be the parent and say, Karen, what are your thoughts on that? And just throw the ball to
Oh,
you.
definitely. That happens.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that definitely happens. Yeah. I mean, you certainly, as a parent, don't want to have an advocate at a meeting that you don't agree with.
Well, yeah, no.
So, yeah,
Uh,
obviously, you already know that you like the person and you like their ideas. So, yeah, absolutely.
well, like that grandfather did, reached out to you. How do we find you?
My website is KarenKLowry.com, or my email is Karen@KarenKLowry.com.
Mm, thank you for the insight. An eye opener, I think, for all parents in terms of behavior where we shun it and say, oh, my kids, they're being bad, quote unquote. No, they're communicating more times than not. Thank you for being
And a
here
very
today.
sad thing that they believe that, and our kids who are very sensitive pick up on it as well and feel bad about themselves.
And what ensues potentially a lifetime of a child
Yeah,
feeling not good enough. No fault to the
absolutely.
parent. Parents are just being parents, but
No,
look at it a different way. Appreciate what you do. We'll
that's
talk
right.
soon. Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.